All right, guys, let's get started. There are a few housekeeping tips that I want to talk to you about before we get started on the retouching, and that's just going to help your Lightroom respond faster to you and just run better when you're doing this type of work. So the first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is going into your Lightroom menu and choosing Preferences. And then down here, in the Camera Raw cache settings, you can see that my cache size is set to 50 gigabytes. By default, it is set to 10 gigabytes only when you open up and install Lightroom for the first time. So I would highly recommend increasing this cache size to anywhere from 30 to 50 gigabytes, because it's going to allow you to be able to access images much faster, and you're going to be able to access more images much faster by increasing the size of that Camera Raw cache. So that's the first tip that I want to talk to you guys about. The second tip is going to be in your catalog preferences, and that's going to be right here in the metadata tab. And this is a little bit of a tricky tip that I want to talk to you guys about. Automatically write changes to XMP. That means if you're working on RAW files, that it's not going to write the changes to the sidecar file automatically while you're working on them and while you're working in Lightroom. And what that means is you're going to be responsible for doing that manually. And so as you can see right down here underneath this checkbox, it says, warning, changes made in Lightroom will not automatically be visible in other applications unless written to the XMP. So if you change the exposure and you change the white balance of an image, but you don't save that to your XMP specifically, you're not going to be able to see those changes in other files. Say you take the exact same photo from Lightroom and you put it in Adobe Camera Raw, you're not going to see those changes unless that information is written to the XMP. So if you're going to uncheck this, which will speed up time when you're doing some of the portrait retouching techniques that I'm going to teach you in today's class, you definitely want to get in the habit of selecting all of your images at the end of your whatever you're working on, and then making sure that you save those changes to the XMP. And so I'll show you how to do that right now. So what you want to get in the habit of doing is selecting all of your images that you've been working on using Command or Control A, and then you're going to come up to the Metadata tab, and you're going to choose Save Metadata to Files, or Command S. And that's going to save out all of those XMP data to your images, so that if you open them in Camera Raw or you open them in any other program, you're going to be able to see those changes immediately show up and be visible. Now, in a perfect world, what I'd like is for you to be able to save XMPs when you're quitting your Lightroom. I think that would be really beneficial, because it wouldn't take up time and processor power, while it wouldn't be writing them real time to the files that you're working on, but it also wouldn't make you manually responsible for saving out those XMPs. So if you could basically just choose to save XMP data upon quit of Lightroom, then that would be so much easier, and it would definitely be a win-win. All right, one more tip. The last tip that I want to talk to you guys about is your history states within your Lightroom of an image. This is very similar to the history states within Photoshop, but one thing that this continues to do is anytime you make the slightest adjustment to an image in Lightroom, it actually logs that as a history state, so that you can move backwards and continue to move backwards, continue to move backwards. But what that does is it really slows down Lightroom. So if at any point Lightroom starts to be really sluggish in its response time for you, or you start to just hear your processor kind of working really, really hard, what I would recommend is coming into your history area and just Xing out and clearing all of those history states. That's going to allow Lightroom to focus more on the changes that you're specifically making to the image and not necessarily on remembering all of those things. Now, don't be alarmed, because just because you erased all of those history states, it's not as if you are flattening the image per se in Photoshop. What that's doing is it's basically just forgetting all of the backward steps, but you still are editing non-destructively within Lightroom, and that's where the beauty lies. So it's not as if you're being destructive as soon as you erase all of those history states. So now that we've done some of our bookkeeping stuff, we can get started on really doing the retouching. So the next chapter is about all of those awesome keyboard shortcuts you're going to be using and getting familiar with, and then we're going to be moving on to the retouching.